Now, if you've been out in these YouTube streets for as long as I have, you might have noticed things have changed a bit. We went from chortling at Charlie Bit My Finger all the way to admiring Mr. Beast for saving the entire world.
Here you go.
Thank you.
However, whilst all the normies were rickrolling to Nyan Cat, there was a darker, quieter, and lesser known side to YouTube. A world of conspiracy theories. I'm talking New World Order, Illuminati, World Trade Center, the Rockefellers, the Bilderberg boys. Well, this world was small in the beginning and everyone ignored it, and then...
Jews will not replace us!
After YouTube's war trying to rid its platform of literal Nazis through a campaign of demonetization and deplatforming, now, in the year of our Lord 2026, the Nazis are back and they are doing better than ever. So today, we will explore YouTube's fascism problem.
And turning a once quiet town into a densely populated, over-trafficked Jewish enclave prioritizing Jews over non-Jews.
Whenever people tell the story of YouTube, it's always the same thing. And we hear about the cat meme videos, the PewDiePie, Logan Paul, Mr. Beast. Yeah, cool. Nah, yeah, we get it. But there is a side to the rise of YouTube that people don't really talk about that much. And that is the impact it had on news and politics. YouTube launches in 2004, and there's a few YouTube OGs that recognize its potential for politics. You had people like the Young Turks, Sam Cedar, Secular Talks. As well, you would have Alex Jones and InfoWars. What they saw is that YouTube had a potential to be something different. Traditionally, you would watch the news on television. It'd be these, half hour to an hour show with segments on different topics. But on YouTube, you could clip sections that people were interested in and things that were going to keep people's attention. So, things like big rants, dramatic footage from protests, in-person confrontations. And what was happening on YouTube is these independent media outlets were voicing opinions that weren't really very present on mainstream media. But the power of YouTube wasn't just for news clips, it was also for long-form documentaries. In 2005, there was a documentary called Loose Change, a film that alleges that 9/11 was an inside job done by the government, George Bush, and the New World Order bad boys. They took them puppies down.
A group of conspiracy theorists gathered to demand an investigation of who was really behind the terror attacks. It's all because of an internet film called Loose Change that is challenging the official version of 9/11.
So there's many versions of this documentary because every time they put it out, it would get instantly fact-checked and debunked. And so they would re-edit it to try and, brush over that bit, throw some new claims out there. But all in all, Loose Change is widely considered one of the first ever internet blockbusters. It got millions and millions of views. At one point, it was top on Google's video charts. And I can't explain to you how important Loose Change was and the era of 9/11 truther conspiracy stuff on YouTube. Its impact was massive, but it was something to do with YouTube in particular. Right, so pre-YouTube, the world of conspiracy theories, it's been around for a very long time. You always had the UFO bros, the religious apocalyptic people, preppers, doomsdayers, the extreme libertarians, all the way to white nationalists and neo-Nazis. But you gotta understand, before YouTube, these worlds were all very spread out. What was starting to happen on YouTube in those early days is all of these different theories, all of these different conspiracy worlds were being condensed into one place, one search engine, and one recommended videos tab. So maybe you're like 13 years old and you go onto YouTube and just one evening you type in real life footage of aliens with big boobs and you watch this video, you enjoy it, and YouTube goes, hey, why not try some lizard people New World Order stuff? All of this on a nice, easy to use website.
We have these cousins who are members of the same secret society who have sworn an oath to each other above all other oaths. And they admit, even in the mainstream media, but laugh and say, oh, it's no big deal, that these so-called leaders engage in bizarre occultic rituals.
Whilst making this video, I've genuinely had a realization just how normalized it's become that we are constantly tracked and spied on the internet. We don't think about it anymore. When you hear ad reads talking about data, eyes gloss over, you just tune it out. Because I realized that anything you do online, literally anything, is being tracked and surveyed to see what inputs you put into the machine to measure you and build a personalized profile of you as a consumer so that they can manipulate you and target you with adverts. Today's sponsor is Proton Mail. It was built to fight exactly this. A group of scientists came together to try and attempt to make an alternative to big tech without trackers and spyware. Proton Mail is a brilliant email service with no ads, no trackers, no scanning your emails to figure out what kind of toaster you're emotionally vulnerable to purchasing. Everything is protected with end-to-end encryption, meaning you and the person you send your mail to are the only people who can read it. It also will block invisible email trackers. It flags phishing scams. You can even create multiple email aliases, so your real address isn't getting spammed everywhere. And the best part is, it is absolutely free to use. Why big tech platforms win despite being creepy weirdos is because of what they call vendor lock-in. They make it so difficult for you to move to a competitor that you just don't bother. So Proton Mail obviously understands this. They've specifically designed a way for you to switch over by being able to import all of your old emails onto Proton Mail, and you can just move over gradually if you want. So if you're getting a bit tired of being constantly spied on, even your emails, you can use my link, proton.me/Jimmy the Giant, and take back control of your privacy. Anyway, back to the video. Now, this sort of content, you weren't going to really find it on mainstream television. Maybe the odd funny documentary taking the piss out of it, but by and large it wasn't really going to be there, and there is a reason for that. Due to section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, written all the way back in 1996, places like YouTube were given a legal privilege to not be held liable to content other users published on its platform. You can't sue YouTube for content that is on YouTube. Traditional mainstream media had some constraints to it. They had some regulations, but also they could be held liable for defamation if they just outright lied about a public figure. They had shareholders who wanted to maintain a good brand image. They had advertisers that could threaten to pull out if you were getting backlash. All of these different stakeholders generally kept mainstream media from covering absolutely unhinged conspiracy theories. Generally, I mean, they lied about the weapons of mass destruction, but let's not go into that. But yeah, if I was, a CNN host and I alleged that George Bush is actually a demon lizard who smells like sulfur, who deliberately orchestrated an attack on the World Trade Center, and my source for this information was a guy on Usenet called Trutherman777, yeah, that might have some negative consequences for the network. But we're on YouTube, baby, and who gives a fuck?
I can literally say anything I want.
So slowly, YouTube, with this freedom, started to actually progress. And things that are happening on YouTube start to increasingly have an impact. IRL, Occupy Wall Street, the rise of Obama, exposing police brutality, organizing the Arab Spring. But you're also starting to see the weirdest shit, right? The 9/11 truther protests, the Sandy Hook harassment campaign, and Pizzagate. All of this shit was happening in real life, and no one really took it very seriously. That was until
Donald Trump is our guest, ladies and gentlemen, for the next 30 minutes or so. He is a maverick. He's an original. He tells it like it is. Can you speak to, as president, what your relationship would be with foreign leaders and what you know about Vladimir Putin? Because all I know is, why are we starting a fight with Russia when they're not doing anything to us?
Right. Well, number one, and just to finish on the oil, by the way, I say hit the oil, but we should keep the oil. In other words, we'll get ExxonMobil, they'll go in, we'll get other of our oil companies, we'll get some of the great oil companies, we bid it out. We should keep the oil. In the old days, to the victor belong the spoils, right? We don't have that. We go in, we fight a war, and we leave. We get nothing, except we get debt and we get deficit. That's all we get. I think I get along great with people. I mean, I will probably get along well with him, and if I don't, somebody else will, and who knows? He's a difficult cookie.
So around 2017, right, there's a researcher. His name is Zach Exley. And they wrote a paper. The paper is called Black Pigeon Speaks, The Anatomy of the Worldview of an Alt-Right YouTuber.
Propelling the term alt-right into the national spotlight.
Explain to us what alt-right is.
In this paper, they go through the various topics, the emotions, and the tactics used by the emerging far-right YouTube scene. Another paper pops up a little bit later, The Making of the YouTube Radical. And in this paper, they explain how the YouTube algorithm itself was pushing people toward far-right extremist content. And, you probably know how this story goes, but a lot of this content is kind of hard to find now. But sneaky old Jimmy managed to find us a little archive, right? So this is from 2017, an archived version of a video called What is National Socialism? So yeah, this is Nazi propaganda, right? This is what we're watching. And we watch it, and it's kind of like this this almost jolly friendly guy. He's disarming a little bit, and he explains to us very reasonably about Nazism and why it's great.
We believe in taking from the right nationalism without capitalism, and from the left socialism without internationalism. At the end of the day, National Socialism and its economic theory is about putting the nation first, because the nation is your family. Communism wages a war of the poor against the rich, and capitalism is a war of the rich against the poor. Both of these are Jewish ideologies, and ideologies that poison the national community.
So there I was browsing the World Wide Web, and I was clicking more buttons. Young, hip, and far right. Europe's youth reject multiculturalism. Uploaded to a channel called Julius Streicher, which is the name of a Nazi politician. And this video had 279,000 views.
They're well equipped to do a Facebook Live, which instantly attracts hundreds of views. Europe Youth Reconquista, the last word referring to a key identitarian belief that they need to retake and protect Europe from Muslim migrants.
I was clicking some more and I came across Black Pigeon Speaks. You remember this guy, the paper? All right, this is him. I found him. Just a couple of clicks. This video had 163,000 views, and what's more is he had 218,000 subscribers, and his channel was verified. He was dropping bangers like why women destroy nations / civilizations and other uncomfortable truths. I found James Alserup. This one is pretty well known. He was very close to Nick Fuentes. They nearly set up a business together, from my understanding. Then I found Red Ice TV, a Nazi organization set up in 2002. Then I found the infamous Stefan Molyneux, a white nationalist, promoter of scientific racism and eugenics. Now, whilst I was clicking through all these videos, right, these were channels I didn't watch personally when I was even on the right. I wasn't really even aware of many of these people back then. But the strange thing that instantly stood out to me was just how similar and how much crossover and overlap there was between Nazi creators and softer right-wing creators that I did listen to. Back then, these lot used to call themselves classic liberals. They loved that one for a while. They would call themselves moderates or centrists. They would be the kind of person that would be like, yeah, I don't mind about gay people. You go, queen. And maybe we should even consider legalizing weed. But feminism, I think it's gone a bit too far, don't you think? These lot, look, let's be honest, they weren't Nazis. But in their content, right, the thumbnails, the titles, and the enemies in society they didn't like, the content the actual Nazi people would make was kind of identical. Feminism has gone too far. Woke progressive cancel culture is threatening Western civilization. Black Lives Matter's too extreme. We're okay with them existing, but mattering? But what's more, right, is some of the overtly white nationalist creators would do direct collaborations with some of the softer right-wing people that I did listen to.
It was a particularly ugly aspect of science because the IQ literature reveals that which no one would want to be the case, which is that there are profound and virtually irremediable differences in people's cognitive performance.
Is the race and IQ stuff. This is something you dive into a lot, and I think people think that there is somehow a racist element to it.
It's like saying, do you want to make your argument that the sun is the center of the solar system? It's like, well, it's not a personal thing. Like, this is not an idea I have come up with.
Okay, so not your idea.
Stephen Molyneux was, I don't know, he was kind of in the gang. He interviewed Dave Rubin, Milo Yiannopoulos, Jordan Peterson. I mean, Joe Rogan even had him on, for fuck's sake. The borders between the most extreme creators and the anti-SJW crowd, they were pretty blurry. So it begs us the question, why was there so much crossover and so much in common with literal Nazis?
One of the things you see that's very characteristic of the utopian left is the absolute insistence that anyone oppressed is a victim. On some campuses, and this is true in California, it's now considered a form of aggression. It's classified under the microaggression.
The current cult of victimhood now encourages people to appeal to others to recognize their victim status and look for support on social media for the smallest of perceived slights. Think of the ludicrous idea of microaggressions.
Okay, so we'll answer that, we'll get there, but for me to do so, we need to explain what exactly fascism is. When you were in school, you walked in and you were told fascism is Hitler, swastikas, gas chambers, and white master race. Which all of this, yeah, that is true. That is it. But it'd be like me trying to explain the sun by just saying it's a bright blob. Sure, correct, but did that help you? Fascism is a process. What fascism becomes at the end is often not what it presents itself as in the beginning. It doesn't start with a dictator campaigning on genociding people. That is where it ends. Fascism is the process of getting to that point. Okay, so fascism will always typically arrive during a crisis. You know, the economy's fucked. Living standards are falling. Inequality is getting out of control. And people are losing faith in the establishment, the system. So often in this period of time, many people who are working will look around and go, hang on a second, we're doing all this work and the bosses are paying us shit while them lot seem to be doing pretty well. In steps the socialist. The socialist comes along and goes, hey guys, this whole capitalism thing is what's causing this, right? Capitalism inherently produces wealth inequality. The wealth then concentrates in the hands of a few very powerful people, meaning that us lot at the bottom, we all get fucked.
The idea that anybody would believe that this is a great economy when 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck, when the cost of healthcare is going up, people can't afford housing, people can't afford their basic groceries, childcare system is dysfunctional, people can't afford to go to college. And if this is the greatest economy in the history of the world, God help us.
And the fascist, you know, he's sat there and he's listening. He's going, oh, boring. It's not that. It is actually, have you thought about it could be the gays? Could be the gays that are doing this to us. And the Jewish, it could be the gay Jewish ones. So what fascism does, right, it subverts a popular feeling in society that the economy is unfair, and typically in the beginning they will agree with it. The talking might even sound similar. He'll say, you're right, your instincts are correct, society has been corrupted. But my friends, let's not blame capitalism. It's because there are a series of enemies trying to undermine us. Outsiders, degenerates, disabled people, Marxists, feminists. I just want to caveat, sometimes fascists do criticize capitalism, but it's always done so that they can blame Jewish people. So don't, you know, they're not that bothered about the structural inequality. It's they don't like the Jews. That's it. And they have to subvert socialism in other ways, right? So if they feel a specific camaraderie with other workers who are also being exploited by the elite class of owners, of bosses, capitalists, what the fascist does is it wants to retain the original hierarchy and structure. It doesn't want to completely upend the system. So it creates a new identity based around nationalism or one's race, one's ethnicity.
And I say, really, we're not supposed to use that word. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist.
It tells a story that our civilization is under threat because of cultural enemies. They believe that the strong must rule, that hierarchy is natural, that weakness is decadent, that the quest for equality is a disease, and that the nation must re-find its former glory, its former strength, and be reborn through discipline, hard force, masculinity, tradition, and crushing their enemies. Meanwhile, the big businesses, they hear all that and they go, yeah, no, sick. We're like, that's okay with us. I wasn't really sold on the guillotine, the Bella Ciao. Yeah, that stuff was making me feel a bit weird. So yeah, very often big corporations will fall in line with the fascists. And like, yeah, they achieve it, right? They do it, that happens, and obviously nothing improves. You know, if you're a worker, like, that system doesn't really fix a lot of your problems. So what the fascist has to do then is to resort to performative fuck shit. They have to keep the public endlessly distracted, endlessly angry through wars, crackdowns on their enemies, big shows of strength through military parades. Some call this the fascist spectacle, transforming politics into aesthetic performance, as opposed to improving people's material circumstances. So if we jump forward to now, with all of that in mind, you have to remember the neo-fascist, the neo-Nazi, they don't always say and do things exactly like it's 1933. But what is similar and what's important to remember is that every single issue that happens in society is fed through the exact same machine. Immigration becomes an invasion and white genocide. Modern feminism is degeneration. Progressive anti-racism is actually anti-whiteness.
It might be regarded as unacceptable to the woke authoritarian moralists who now insist, for example, that we celebrate Pride Month, not hour or day or week, but month, and who have literally called it Pride Month instead of LGBT plus month or whatever else alphabet acronym which is currently insisted upon as the only acceptable enlightened terminology. Up yours, woke moralists.
And whilst many of the people engaging in making this content might not have identified themselves as being neo-Nazis or neo-fascists, either knowingly or unknowingly, the videos that the soft right-wing anti-SJW people were making was priming the viewer to have the same feelings, concerns, and blame the same enemies as the real neo-Nazis and neo-fascists. And you have to bear in mind, the fascists, they're not stupid. This blurring of lines between themselves and maybe softer anti-SJW creators was deliberate. They had developed a deliberate strategy of hiding their ideology in irony, memes, and plausible deniability. They knew that if an academic, a reporter, a journalist, wrote an article warning about how the OK hand signal was racist because the alt-right had turned the OK hand signal into a racist symbol, the alt-right could use their article and twist their concern into laughing at them.
You're a neo-Nazi. That's according to The Independent, who published an entire article defaming Mike Cernovich and Cassandra Fairbanks as white supremacists.
Making these people, these academics, etc., seem unhinged and hysterical. And what this does is delegitimize experts, people who really know what they're talking about, to make you lose trust in them, and by doing so creating more opportunities to turn people against the out of touch liberal elites.
Some examples include white nationalist Richard Spencer. However, it was the use by the Christchurch shooting suspect that marked a shift in the conversation. The OK sign isn't the first seemingly innocuous bit of culture claimed by alt-right groups. Pepe the Frog went from innocent cartoon to alt-right meme during the 2016 election, thanks to a similar online evolution.
The intersection of ambiguity and racism can be weaponized in order to manipulate the media, to manipulate popular opinion, to spread ideas into the discourse.
So, okay, yeah, Donald Trump wins, right? 2016. He wins, you remember that? All the way back then. And somehow during that, they didn't decide to, throw him in jail forever. They chose to do it again now. Okay, yeah. And with all this reporting around how the YouTube algorithm was pushing people towards far-right content, after movements like Gamergate, all the SJW-owned compilations, QAnon, new important political names coming into the scene who didn't rise through traditional media, like Ben Shapiro, Milo Yiannopoulos, Candace Owens. And they hear about a person called Richard Spencer. And everyone starts asking, what the fuck is the alt-right pipeline?
Young, college-educated, clean-cut, and radicalized. The alt-right movement ready to stand up for white power.
And you gotta remember, right, in the mind of the liberal establishment, they can't be responsible for why people have turned into the far right. It cannot be due to decades of neoliberal economics, widening wealth inequality, decimating towns, deindustrialization, alienation, creating a feeling of resentment amongst many people in society. No, it's not our system. It's them bad boys saying the bad stuff on that bad YouTube website. And so their fucking solution is, well, if we just ban everyone, what could go wrong?
Millions of videos are uploaded onto YouTube every day, but they include extremist material such as jihadi propaganda and footage from neo-Nazi campaigns, both of which are outlawed. And yet these hate videos attract advertising, often randomly generated. Here, a radical Islamist preaches above a holiday advert.
All of these big brands who just started social media themselves, they panic and threaten to pull out, and YouTube brings about what is known as the Adpocalypse.
What triggered it was an ad for Coca-Cola appeared on a racist video on YouTube that had about 800 views. Advertisers flipped out saying, if YouTube can't make sure our ads don't show up on racist content, we're pulling our money out of YouTube. Some actually did, and as a result, YouTube drastically overreacted, cut almost all ads to news and politics channels like The David Pakman Show, and overnight, we lost 99% of the revenue on our YouTube channel.
Right, so you had Adpocalypse 1. Everyone loved it, really good reviews. And then, yeah, in December of 2017, Logan Paul goes into a forest wearing this hat and films a dead suicide victim. And he's in the thumbnail, and that video is fully monetized. Gets loads of views.
Second Adpocalypse!
Yeah, the second one was shit. They didn't need to make it. They lost all the magic. So yeah, YouTube brings around like a new era of content moderation. Whereas before, basically anyone could be monetized. Now they put a threshold. Like you had to have a certain amount of subscribers, certain amount of views, watch time. You needed to be a legit channel. You couldn't just pop up and bang out like a 4-hour Nazi documentary anymore. As well, they changed the recommended system, the algorithm, to deliberately suppress content that they considered to be borderline content. So obviously, they were, suppressing overt Nazi content, but also just, stuff that was a little bit spicy. Entire categories of content, not just political content, started to see a massive reduction in views. I'm talking like gaming channels that maybe they were playing a horror game. Sports channels, like I know firsthand, friends of the channel Stora, their whole channel of doing parkour was completely demonetized overnight, like nearly destroyed their business. And then yeah, news channels as well. And a lot of the suppression was pretty unfair. The reason this was happening was because YouTube were in fucking panic mode. They were desperately trying to seem like they had the platform under control, and they were just dishing out bans and completely demonetizing channels, and it was pretty fucked up. But all of this effort and all of this attempt to try and keep shit under control, it was too late, man. The genie was out of the bag, the cat, the lamp.
One people, one nation, and immigration.
We begin tonight with that breaking news, a horrific scene in Charlottesville, Virginia, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence and chaos.
In August 2017, you get Charlottesville, what was called the Unite the Right rally, a coalition of white nationalists, neo-Nazis, and militia groups, or as Donald Trump calls them,
very fine people.
This event galvanizes a whole new generation of white nationalists, namely Nick Fuentes and his Groyper movement. Post 2015, year on year, far-right political violence was growing and growing, becoming the largest category of political violence. Then, in March of 2019, Christchurch happens.
It is with extreme sadness that I tell you that as at 7 p.m. tonight, we believe that 40 people have lost their lives in this act of extreme violence. It is clear that this can now only be described as a terrorist attack. These are people who I would describe as having extremist views.
The Christchurch shooter was a product of this online far-right culture. The whole massacre was done and designed as like an internet age performance, steeped in great replacement narratives and meme culture. Within the video he posted of it, he says the phrase, "subscribe to PewDiePie." Now, subscribe to PewDiePie was this meme that was originally a light-hearted online feud between PewDiePie and a channel called T-Series, an Indian channel that were competing for the top spot of most subscribed channels on YouTube. But the alt-right, like they have done with many things, decided to co-opt this meme. Subscribe to PewDiePie to the neo-Nazis became a rallying cry to promote their ideology of inferior races. A video that was made 6 years ago called this out, talking about the PewDie pipeline. It's an incredible watch that you can learn a lot about this stuff from. I'll link it below. All of this world online brewed into this moment. Under our noses, no one saw it coming. And the big tech social media platforms were being increasingly pressurized to do something about this real world problem that was coming from these platforms. So yeah, big tech starts going into panic mode and starts deplatforming and banning some pretty high profile people. Alex Jones gets banned after racking up tons of strikes for misinformation and hate speech. Whilst not being a neo-Nazi, YouTube were clamping down on conspiracy theories because it was resulting in real life harm, harassment, and attacks built on some of the theories that these people were peddling. High profile neo-Nazis get banned also. David Duke, Richard Spencer, Stefan Molyneux, Molyneux, and Nick Fuentes. But you see, like, yeah, instead of just getting rid of them, it had the opposite effect. Very quickly, inside the conspiracy world, the idea of deplatforming was weaponized, turned into a narrative that the liberal elite were cracking down on free speech and suppressing the truth tellers.
After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America.
The viewers are then trained to see that every time an individual is demonetized or deplatformed, it's because the establishment wants to hide the truth from you.
As I watch the entire establishment's media, government, politicians lie about me. But I also know there's an army of people watching this who have seen their lies. So there's people that you think you can just silence me. It's not going to work. You're going to martyr me. And I'm not going to back down. And do you know what? You're going to create 1,000 Tommy Robinsons. You've already done that with your actions over the last 7 days. They've already done that. So there is no winning for them at this current situation.
This is the built-in immune system of that worldview. And because of the sloppiness of the moderation in the Adpocalypse era, many YouTube channels were catching strays who were not neo-Nazis at all. And so the entire right-wing ecosystem capitalized on this. See? This is the left-wingers who silence the people who tell the truth. This is political bias. This is what George Orwell warned us about in a book he wrote that I have definitely read. So yeah, this topic of censorship and free speech became an on-ramp for many people toward the political right, because they framed the Adpocalypse as if this was a thing that was only and exclusively happening to right-wing people. And they even go after the centrists who try and explore the truth. Centrists in this context meaning people who are right-wing who don't know that they're right-wing. Of course, in reality, the Adpocalypse didn't just target the right. Many left-wing creators also went down. Carl Kalinske, David Pakman, the serfs were completely banned. And the other thing I find funny is, you know how Tommy Robinson, he also too got banned or shadow banned. And he obviously would claim that it's because of left-wing YouTube silencing anyone who criticizes radical Islam. Meanwhile, YouTube were also removing and banning radical Islamists. But yeah, of course, none of the right-wing podcast bros were that concerned about the free speech rights of jihadists or of just regular left-wing creators. Instead, they created a convincing narrative. And once you accept that narrative that YouTube represents the left, who were tyrannically suppressing right-wing views to control all of our brains, as opposed to being a capitalist organization protecting itself from brand damage and losing advertisers, ignoring that, you become psychologically primed to think that if a person is censored or suppressed, they must be speaking the truth. But you know, that doesn't matter, right? Because YouTube, they purged all the bad guys and now everything's okay. Right? No, wrong!
After being silenced by Facebook and Twitter for months, former US President Donald Trump said Wednesday he'll be launching his own social media platform, Truth Social.
So you guys watching, you know the wonderful world of capitalism, right? Where it makes really, really useful things that we all want and desire and is super beneficial for everyone. Well, luckily, right, you know, after all these neo-Nazis and also just right-wingers were kicked off of YouTube, the free market swoops in. Benevolently, it says, my friends, let us bring you to a new home. A new promised land. And so yeah, very quickly a bunch of competitors to YouTube pop up. Lots of them. Kick, Rumble, Odyssey, Gab, BitChute, DLive, Locals, Substack, Truth Social, Telegram channels. And what some of these platforms were doing was explicitly marketing themselves as free speech alternatives to mainstream social media. And they would specifically attract creators who had been banned off of YouTube or demonetized from platforms.
Censorship is back and it's happening everywhere. The platforms are controlling narratives and pushing the stuff they want us to see. We've got to fight back. Rumble is the only company that stood the test of time and they deserve our support.
Inviting them to a place that had far less rules and far less regulations. And how do you think that went?
Yeah.
Wait, how many Nazis do we have here?
Yeah, so it's like, bro,
what the hell?
Dude, I don't know if you realize you're at a Klan rally.
Rumble, heavily funded by billionaire and all-round evildoer Peter Thiel, and a ton of venture capital tied to conservative media ecosystems. Truth Social, owned by Donald Trump app financed through SPAC investors linked to major conservative political networks. Kick, closely tied to crypto gambling company Stake.com, founded by billionaire crypto gambling entrepreneurs. These men arrived on the scene and they did not give a fuck. Anything goes, whatever you want, just say whatever the fuck you want. Finally, the exiles had found their promised land. This was home to people like Andrew Tate, who got sweeping bans across all social media, along with the Red Pill creator Sneeko. Russell Brand moved over to these, along with a load of COVID skeptics, vaccine deniers, as well Jan 6 people, all the election fraud lot. These lot, they just switched platforms. Every single ban that would happen on one of these mainstream platforms would be further fuel for the far right to bring people over to this alternative ecosystem that was concentrating everyone into the same place, connecting with each other, sharing ideas, beliefs, and learning from each other, creating a potent far-right ideology. But it would be on the 12th of January 2021 where the President of America, Donald Trump, got banned from posting to YouTube, as well as a ton of other, basically all other social media platforms, which would change absolutely fucking everything.
YouTube announced Tuesday it suspended U.S. President Donald Trump's channel as it violated policies against inciting violence after last week's deadly riot at the U.S. Capitol.
It's going to be a catastrophic mistake for them.
So originally, everyone, not just left-wingers, right-wingers, were against Donald Trump with January 6th, right? People forget about this, but the whole, trying to overthrow democracy based on the election fraud lie that he was never able to prove in any of the many, many, many court cases they went through. For a brief moment, pretty much the entire country went, whew, we dodged a bullet. But then he got banned from social media, and that was too much, man.
Trump's being banned permanently by Twitter.
They're removing their opposition from the discourse, period. And it's been happening for some time. Yeah. We saw back in, 2018 when they got rid of Jones and Milo Yiannopoulos. Yeah. The censorship is bigger than just the president, and it could be even hundreds of thousands of people.
They have now set the predicate that they can do it whenever they want. And what they are doing right now is that the tech bros have declared war on conservatives.
So yeah, this was fuel for the alternative platforms. This was a great thing for them. And then, the obvious other accelerant to this was Elon Musk buying Twitter, changing it to X and then reinstating all of the fucking banned people from Twitter. That doesn't just mean Donald Trump, MAGA, and the COVID lot. That also means literally neo-Nazis and fascists. And the algorithm, for some reason, just really seems to like extreme ethno-nationalist content.
Right-wing content was shown much more often to our X users, regardless of their political leaning. It represented 62% of all content served up, here in pink.
Previously, the big tech platforms were kind of in this sort of unwritten agreement that they had some responsibility to moderate their platforms and what happened there. But Twitter, with Elon Musk, it swings the exact opposite way. He, being a massive voice with a massive reach, was able to amplify a critique of a liberal bias and right-wing censorship in Silicon Valley. And this narrative would slot perfectly into Trump world. They loved this. This was perfect. And you got to think culture at large was starting to shift. The right was gaining more and more momentum, more power. So slowly, YouTube, its fears start to change. If in the past they were scared that big brands would pull out from running adverts on their platform because the content's too extreme, well, the market was starting to change. And now YouTube was starting to fear cultural backlash and becoming seen as authoritarian and politically partisan against MAGA. So by late 2024 to 2025, YouTube, without, some big grand announcement like Elon Musk, just ever so quietly start to widen the exceptions to what might be considered dangerous content. If YouTube considered that the content was relevant to public interest, they would tell reviewers not to remove content if content was considered important or newsworthy. You have to bear in mind, at the end of the day, YouTube is a business. That is what they are. Businesses, if you didn't know, care about money. Moderation costs money. Content that sells outrage, keep people on the platform engaged and watching, sharing, doing the stuff, that makes more money. The economic incentives for YouTube was to keep edgy content on the platform. Losing creators to their competition was not ideal. And in Trump's second campaign for president, where they elected him again, for a second time.
Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
Trump's support was growing across Silicon Valley and big tech. Mark Zuckerberg gets a haircut, he goes on Joe Rogan, he tells everyone that fucking boys are dope.
It was during the Biden administration when they were trying to roll out the vaccine program. And while they're trying to push that program, they also tried to censor anyone who was basically arguing against it. And I think it's another to basically say that masculinity is bad. And I just think we kind of swung culturally to that part of the kind of the spectrum where, you know, it's all like, okay, masculinity is toxic. We have to like get rid of it completely. It's like, no, like it's both of these things are good.
Big tech was starting to realize after Trump 2024, it's better off for them and their business to not fight against the establishment, but instead to fall in line with it. They knew that Trump is a crazy guy. If Trump woke up one day and declared YouTube a terrorist hotspot of radical leftists and banned it, even if he couldn't do that legally and it was overturned or whatever, ultimately that isn't good for YouTube. And so YouTube chills out a bit on moderation and starts undoing some of the old bans. Once the industry discovered that actually the advertisers are still on the platform, the threat of cancel culture didn't really materialize how they thought it might, and if all the other social media platforms are moving toward this Wild West free speech approach, then, well, if you can't beat them, you might as well allow the Nazis back on the platform. Very recently, on the 24th of February, a YouTuber by the name of Tyler Oliveira uploads a video titled, "I exposed New Jersey's Jewish invasion."
You're not welcome here, and you're not welcome in a lot of other places based on your videos.
You don't own this place, you don't own America.
No, you should move on. Nobody wants you here, please move out.
Tyler, it seems like you discovered that anti-Semitism is lucrative, nah? You say anti-Semitism, I say anti-Goyism.
Uploaded with a bunch of thumbnails made of AI showing Orthodox Jewish men with guns and signs saying Jews only, with a police force saying Goyim Task Force and signs saying no Goys. What's more is Tyler posts this video to Twitter with the phrase "Hello Goyim" attached. Goy being a term used by Jewish people to describe non-Jewish people, a term that has been, who would have guessed it, co-opted by right-wingers. Oh, I forgot to say he also posted Goy Lives Matter. So you might be wondering to yourself, how the fuck did this happen? Reasonable question. Tyler started out on YouTube as a prank channel and then naturally became a MrBeast copycat before pivoting to what he is now on, which is investigative journalism. Originally, like, his investigations would mainly be about, I don't know, UFOs. But it would be this video called "I Investigated Hitler's Death," where the video itself isn't really that interesting. It's kind of just jokey. It doesn't sound like Tyler is some neo-Nazi in this video. It's sort of just making fun of the conspiracy theory. But that doesn't really matter, because what it did do for Tyler was teach him where the exact boundaries were for YouTube's moderation. The title had the word "death" in quotes, implying that maybe he's not dead. It has Hitler in it with a swastika, a sign that says "No Jews." These things were all things that a few years ago would have had you banned off of the platform. However, this video is still on the platform. Over time, Tyler's investigations become more and more politically charged. He starts doing videos on the Mexican border. He claims in the video that he knows nothing about politics, and he attempts to frame this highly politicized topic as just a thing that he went to go look at as a YouTuber with absolutely no bias and willing to explore the truth.
I'm no politician. The border is definitely not respected out here. I didn't expect to play journalist today, but I guess I am.
But for me, you know, and you can look at all of them if you want to, but for me, the video that would stand out was his video from Ohio about the Haitians eating cats and dogs hoax. What he does in this video is basically go up to locals and ask them what they think of the Haitians. They say loads of racist shit. They spread rumors. They just say things.
You know, and they're everywhere. They take our fucking apartments. The landlords make the people move out so they can rent to the Haitians to get more money. You know, it's bullshit. You know, you go to the grocery store, there's no fucking groceries because, you know, they give them $3,000 a fucking month plus food stamps.
Do you think you'll sell the house to a Haitian family one day?
Hell no. I wouldn't give them motherfuckers the sweat off my balls if they was dying of thirst. Don't wave at me, you sorry fucking Sam. I tell them like it is, fuck man. I don't like them. I don't like them, and I want them to know I don't like them.
And Tyler, the investigative journalist, he manages to spend the entire 23-minute video on the claim that Haitians are eating cats and dogs without investigating if Haitians were eating cats and dogs. He says in the video, it's just a rumor, I don't know, and then allows loads of racist people to say racist stuff about Haitians amid the 2024 presidential election. There's no journalism here. This is not journalism, but to a normie viewer, it might feel like journalism. He was simply propagating talking points under the frame that he was being some objective, unbiased voice. Now, for a good period of time, Tyler was the right-wing golden boy. They loved him. They loved when he would, go through and make black and brown immigrants look bad. Fantastic. But when all of a sudden he started to talk about Jews, this would cause a civil war on the right. What you got to understand, right, is that on the right, there is the far right who hate Jews, and then the far right who are very pro-Zionist and basically mainly hate black and Muslims. They all kind of hate everyone, but the Zionist far right draw a little time-out circle around Jewish people and say, let's leave these lot alone. And they were able to maintain this for a good period of time, but recently it's been under attack. You see, it's all because of one particular neo-Nazi white supremacist who still to this day, despite many of the unbannings on YouTube, remains banned.
Jews are running society, women need to shut the fuck up, blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part, and we would live in paradise. It's that simple.
Nick Fuentes was the forbidden fruit for the far-right podcast sphere. They knew if they spoke to him, they'd get a ton of views, but also they understood that anti-Semitism on the right was still a massive taboo. Nick Fuentes was a bridge too far. But there's only so many times you can speak to Jordan Peterson, and it would only be a matter of time before someone would give in to temptation.
Nick Fuentes, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I wanted to meet you. I've heard about you.
This single video blew up the right. Tucker Carlson, who was, again, a golden boy, heavily criticized by the right for platforming Nick Fuentes. But, despite that, the views were rolling in. And this was the green light for the rest of the podcast sphere. Within a few weeks and months, tons of other podcasters get him on. Patrick Bet-David gets 3.5 million views. Stephen Crowder, 1.6. Jack Neal, I don't know him either, but apparently he's a hot boy, 1.1 million. And despite their best wishes to keep anti-Semitism out of the right, it was fucking inevitable. If the podcast sphere, the whole economy had been built around talking to these kinds of people, saying the unsayable thing, being edgy, provocative, rude, offensive, triggering the libs. The market that the right-wing YouTube scene had been building meant that it was only a matter of time before open flirtation with neo-Nazis amongst the mainstream right would occur.
Do you regret saying that? Saying a fact? No, that's absolutely true.
You think Hitler was very fucking cool?
Yes, I do.
One of them.
And I'm tired of pretending he's not.
And whilst Nick Fuentes and the Groyper movement were very much responsible for being the pressure group that brought white nationalism into the mainstream right-wing politic, on a smaller but very impactful scale, over the last 2 years, YouTube has been allowing neo-Nazis on the platform right now, making a wide range of Nazi content. Multiple hour entire documentaries doing Nazi World War II revisionism from a pro-Hitler perspective, framing it as the hidden truth around the real secret story of Hitler and how he's actually a great guy. Black Pigeon Speaks, Red Ice TV, Stefan Molyneux. All neo-Nazis are now back on the platform, uploading to YouTube right now. In Britain, we have a growing ethno-nationalist movement who have built a massive audience and loyal following on YouTube. And you watch these videos and scroll through the comments, these aren't curious people dabbling their toes in alternative theories. These are fully in neo-Nazis. Another part of the content machine is what they call auditors or citizen journalists, who have built an entire content machine around going to anti-migrant rallies or just towns that have an immigrant population, provoking and getting into conflict, filming it, live streaming it, and posting it with racist titles and thumbnails.
They call themselves migrant hotel auditors, entering hotels providing accommodation to asylum seekers, harassing residents, employees, and council staff.
How long have you been in the UK?
But their aggressive tactics are criticised by police and extremism experts.
I'm a citizen journalist.
Are you a racist?
If that makes me racist, so be it. I wear it proudly.
Mainstream British right-wing political podcasts are having debates around whether we should be an ethno-state. These many ethno-nationalist far-right creators in Britain have now managed to embed themselves in a real British political party that is one of the fastest growing in the country, called Restore Britain, headed up by the ex-Reform MP who got kicked out, called Rupert Lowe. Many of the supporters and people involved are well-known fascists, far-right, white nationalists, neo-Nazis, who are flocking to support this party, and recent polling data has put them at 7%. Back in America, Nick Fuentes continues to grow. Neo-Nazis and white nationalists are now growing inside the Republican Party. Massive streamers like Asmongold backs this Nick Fuentes shit, and we're starting to see Groyper-esque candidates popping up in America. The famous scandal that happened recently, where a massive percentage of young Republican staffers admit to being groypers. Fuentes himself is starting to apply pressure onto Trump and the entire far right. This is all to say that this YouTube shit ain't a joke.
Over the course of your career, have gotten in a bit of a disagreement with Nick Fuentes. He's
have to answer for a guy who attacks my family and who didn't even support us in 2024. Like I said, I don't like the guy. The guy's come after my family. Of course I do. I think, what did I say about him? That he can eat.
Look, I'll probably make a video on free speech at some point if you want that, comment below. But the sad thing about YouTube is, man, and social media generally, is at one point it really did hold the power to liberate the people, to give a voice to people who otherwise wouldn't have it. However, as time passes, the powerful forces that be manage to take control over the means of communication. YouTube and its economic incentive structure has resulted in it becoming a massive platform for disseminating far-right, neo-Nazi political views. And it's important not to see this as unconscious. This is a conscious decision by them. The conscious decision being the pursuit of profit over everything else. And these decisions have worked out great for big tech. They are the biggest companies the world has ever seen. And it's us who pays that consequence. It's our politicians who become corrupted. It's our friends and families that get ripped apart due to political division. Our communities that get attacked as the far right gains more and more power, influence over people. However, it is important to remember we still have a voice. We still have a window. We must get behind politicians and movements that call to rein in the powers of big tech and these insane billionaires before it's too late. Platforms are not a neutral public square of information. They are privately owned propaganda machines designed to manipulate and change our emotions so that we buy certain products, consume more content, and support certain politicians. This is not something we can just ignore and hope will just go away. It will not get better unless we do something. If you enjoyed this video, it took me a lot to make, a lot to edit. You can support the channel on Patreon. That massively helps. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.